guys, Girl About Library, and I'm here today with a wrap-up of my reading from the month of January. I was going to do a December and January wrap-up, and I started to film it, and I was like, this is too much. I had 8 different books, but I had so much that I wanted to say about them, and so I'm just gonna stick to January. If there is a book from December that I read, I probably have a 60-second book review for it, and I will link those above and below. But January, there was so much good reading in January that it needs its own video, and that is what we're gonna talk about. All of the books that I read in January, they were all amazing. I cannot wait to share them with you guys. Let's get into it. So the first book I read in the month of January was a book that I started in December and was wrapping up. And that is Everything Here is Beautiful by Mira T. Lee. This book is about 2 sisters, Miranda and Lucia. Miranda is the older sister. She's very firstborn, type A tendencies. And then her younger sister, Lucia, is definitely more of a free spirit. And she also has a mental illness. I don't think in the book they defined exactly what that mental illness was, but at times Lucia hears voices, and at her lowest points, she is definitely she's a danger to herself, she's a danger to others. She can't take care of herself, and she has a daughter, so that definitely complicates the situation. And so through the course of the book, we see them grow up. It kind of starts in their early 20s, and it switches between Lucia and Miranda's voices. I think this book does a really good job at showing just how messy and complicated it is to deal with someone who has a mental illness, because Miranda is constantly feeling like she needs to involve herself in Lucia's life. And I should say also, Lucia lives a very fulfilling life outside of her mental illness. So when she's not in the hospital and she's taking her medication like she should be, she has a daughter, she has a husband, she has a career, she moves to Ecuador to be with her husband. She's got a lot going on, and it's, she lives a full life. But Miranda, her older sister, constantly feels the need to insert herself, and sometimes has to, for Lucia's safety. Everyone else in Lucia's life can kind of fall away. And so Miranda knows that she is the only constant, and she needs to be there for her. Miranda, of course, wants to live her own life. She has her own stuff going on. She lives in Switzerland with her significant other, and so she wants to have her own life, but she also has this nagging feeling at all times that Lucia needs her help. And so I think the author does a really good job of showing how messy and complicated that can be, what a difficult balance that is to strike, and then where that responsibility stops. At what point does Lucia need to take responsibility for her own health? At what point does Miranda need to step in? And so I really enjoyed this book. I was sent a copy in exchange for an honest review, and honestly, I really liked it. I think if you like books with a lot of character development, very character driven, not plot driven, this is the book for you. And that was really the only point in the book where I struggled, was when it just felt so character driven that you were like, I need more plot. I need something else going on so that I can have a reason to continue reading. After that, I read Still Me by Jojo Moyes. I was also sent this book in exchange for an honest review, and I really enjoyed this book too. I read Me Before You when I had just had my son, and so I was reading tons of books because I wasn't really leaving the bed very often. And so I read Me Before You and Me After You back to back. And I loved Me Before You. And it's really interesting having read that book, not being on BookTube and not even being on Bookstagram, which is who's not on Bookstagram? That's ridiculous. The problematic nature of Me Before You didn't strike me the same way because I didn't have a bunch of videos that I was watching about how it was problematic. So now, looking back, I can see the issues in it. But I enjoyed it, and I think that for me as a reader, it made me think about things I might not have otherwise thought about. And so I liked reading Me Before You. Me After You was a little too chick lit for me, I think. It was just a little too light and fluffy for my reading tastes. And so I was excited to read Still Me because I love Louisa Clark, but I was hoping that it would be a little bit more to chew than there wasn't me after you. And there definitely is. Still me deals with some really difficult stuff. Third book in the series, Louisa Clark is in New York City. She works for a family called the Gopniks, and she works for the wife of the family. It is Leonard, it's his second wife, and she comes into the family under slightly suspicious circumstances because she's like the guy's masseuse. And so society in general is not super accepting of Agnes into this like social circle. And Louisa is there to kind of try to like grease the wheels a little bit, and also just be an assistant to Agnes. I like what this book dealt with though. Definitely not as heavy of a topic as Me Before You, but still me as an adult woman, I think, deals with a topic that is definitely relevant. And that is that Louisa has this kind of like self that she's built. Like, you know, she likes bumblebee tights and she's kind of eccentric and she has a strong personality and it works for her. But all of that has been built in this small community. And so when she goes to New York City, she has to kind of redefine that and like confirm that that is who she is, because she's put into completely different situations than she's ever encountered in her life before. So she starts doing things that she had never considered doing before. Like, for example, Agnes has a personal trainer. And so Louisa is going on these runs with Agnes and the personal trainer. Now, Louisa would never have thought of herself as a runner or someone who enjoyed doing that. But because she has this opportunity to do it, she discovers that she actually enjoys running. And so I think, like, I mean, I could relate to that. Like, you say that you feel like you feel a certain way about something, and then you have like this door opened and this opportunity to expand who you are, and sometimes you surprise yourself with the things that you end up liking. And so I really like the way that Jojo Moyes explored that in this book. Like, Louisa needed to have her bumblebee type self tested to see if that's really who you are. And I like the Louisa that came out the other side of this book as well. So if you've read the books in this series, I think that this third book, if you liked Me Before You, I think you will like this book as well. After Me Before You, I read the best book I have read in, I don't even know, probably 2 years. Like, this book will change your life. And that is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. This is a book, I feel like if everyone read this book, like, the world would be a better place. That is the kind of book that this is. I kind of want to have like an Eleanor Oliphant like chat of some kind somehow, like a live show or something about it, because I love it so much. If that's something you guys would want to participate in, I think it's hard because you would have to have read the book in order to not be spoiled. So, I don't know. Comments down below with thoughts, because I would really like to talk about it like I need to join a book club. That's what I need. It's like, I need a real life book club, because I need to be able to talk and like have back and forth, which is like the only downside about BookTube, right? Is that there's not as much of that when you're talking. So, anyway, after Eleanor Oliphant, I also read a book that will change your life. And that is The 57 Bus by Dashka Slater. This is a book that I have been wanting to read for a super long time because I heard about it, but then I had to ask my library to order it, so it's kind of been like on my radar and I've been waiting to read it for a while. The 57 Bus is about two teenagers named Sasha and Richard. Sasha identifies as a gender, and I'm going to try my hardest when I am talking about this book to use the they them pronoun, but if I slip, I apologize. And I'll talk more about that because that is actually one of the things that I loved about this book. But Richard is an African-American teenager who rides the same bus as Sasha, the 57 bus. One day when Sasha and Richard are on the bus together, Sasha is napping and Richard lights Sasha's skirt on fire. Sasha is very injured. They're in the hospital for weeks. As a result, Richard was charged with 2 hate crimes and is facing life imprisonment. He was facing being charged as an adult because it was a hate crime. And this book, there are so many things that I love about this book. One, It is written in like really short chapters, and so it's very like, the pace is very quick. I never felt like, okay, I'm like deep in the drudgery of whatever it is we're talking about. Like it's very fast moving. One of the things I really like about this book is that it doesn't assume anything about you as a reader. So like, it doesn't assume that you are familiar with agender people. It doesn't assume that you are familiar with the struggles of African American people in Oakland, California. It doesn't assume that you know about hate crime legislation or any of the topics that it mentions in the book. Dashka Slater does such a good job really laying everything out on the table in a very open-minded way as well. Like, even when she's talking about using the they them pronoun for Sasha, because that is what they prefers when you are talking about them, admits that like it's clunky. It is hard to remember, and Sasha's parents have trouble remembering which pronouns to use when they're talking about Sasha. Like, even their parents have trouble. There isn't this wall built to where you feel like you don't know or you can't understand. Everything just felt so relatable. And the same goes for Richard. So like, they really go into his story and explain like the mental place a teenager is at, to where lighting a skirt on fire might not be a hate crime, even though when Richard was interviewed and asked why he did it, he said it was because he was a homophobe. Like, it's just so level-headed in the way that it approaches everything, and I really, really enjoyed this book. If you are interested in any of what I just said, you should check this out. Last up is Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson. I read this and I knew it was going to be a hard read. So I had the audiobook and the physical book like ready to go. And it was tough. It was really tough. I think I probably absorbed and retained about like maybe 25% of what was discussed in here. I think if anything, it just made me realize like I don't have a framework for a lot of this knowledge, which like, I don't remember all of the education terms because it's been a while since I was in college, but like if you're learning something new and you already know a tiny piece of that information and you're just adding more information onto that, you're much more likely to comprehend what you're being taught because you have a framework for it. I do not have a framework for most of astrophysics. So when he was talking about like the universe and what was before the universe and like how the universe was formed, I don't have a framework for any of that. Like, it was so hard to wrap my brain around these things. And if I had ever thought for a second that I was not a visual learner, I'm wrong. Like, listening to this book, I mean, it's only what, it's 100 and it's like under 200 pages, but I had to read each page like 3 or 4 times to even come close to understanding what he was talking about. So it's a quick read in the sense that it's fairly short, and if you're just flying through it, like, but I was trying to get as much out of it as I could. And I did get a lot out of it. Like, I'm glad that I read it. But I think that there are probably books about astrophysics that are significantly longer, which, I mean, that's why it's for people in a hurry. But like, I don't know how much I really got out of reading this. But the parts of the book that I was familiar with, like he talked a little bit about asteroids, he talked about Pluto, like there were some astrophysics things that like I have a framework for. And so I understood those parts and I got a lot out of those. I think this is something I could see like revisiting in the future if I like had a renewed interest, but it does also make me want to watch his specials because I think having like some video and photo like support to my reading would probably greatly increase my comprehension of this. So that is my wrap up for the month of January. Every single book that I read this month was out of the park, awesome, so glad I read it. Even Astrophysics for People in a Hurry, I am still glad that I read that. And I can't wait to see what I read in February because January was so good. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Let me know below if there are any books that you read in the month of January that you think I should read, you think I shouldn't read. Let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching and have a great day. Bye.